Welcome back to the channel. This is the Action Figure Grader, and I wanted to go over some of the final prices over at LCG Auctions. They had their fall premiere auction, and there were some very high-end items in this auction for not only Star Wars, but pretty much every 1980s and 1990s toy line. And, we're going to go mainly over the Star Wars, obviously, but I was kind of curious to see how this auction would do, just given there's been so many big auctions here lately. Hakes also has an auction going right now. So I thought potentially there would be some flat to prices for the most part. And there were exceptions. There were some that did go for pretty big numbers. But I think in general, I don't know if there was any major surprises from this auction in terms of the final sales prices. But before I dig in, one quick thank you to TJ Presley. He just became a Patreon supporter. TJ, thank you very much for helping to support the channel. Patreon.com/actionfiguregrader. All right, so let's take a closer look at some of these items. I actually thought this final sales price was maybe a little disappointing. This is the early bird set with a double telescoping Luke Farm Boy. For the Luke Farm Boy, and this was an AFA 85, straight 85 sub-scores, only 3 graded higher, and I was kind of, to be honest, I was expecting somewhere between 18 and 20,000. That was kind of my personal expectation. Not that I know these early items that well, but I just thought given the high grade for this one that it would get closer to that 18 number at a minimum, but it did sell for $15,561. So that was the sales price there. It was certainly a beautiful item, but I think, me personally, that was a little bit disappointing relative to what grade it was. Here was a 12-back AFA 85 Luke Farm Boy, beautiful example, unpunched, no price sticker, and that one sold for $9,417, which, that's a big number. That's a pretty big number for a triple 85 for the subgrades. So very, very nice example there. This is probably, honestly, the most disappointing for the item, for these high-end items. This was a 12B Kenner Canada, none graded higher, AFA 85. It was punched, so that I'm sure that could have held the price back a little bit, but there are a total of 6 graded AFA 85. And, to me, if you're getting a 12, the Kenner Canada, I would rather have this one than the 12A, personally. That's just my personal opinion, but it's just really hard to find some of these early Kenner Canada items, and I thought that price was a borderline steal at $33.40. Again, you're talking to somebody that doesn't collect these early 12-backs and never did, but just a beautiful item. It was a very, very nice example for the Kenner Canada Luke Farm Boy. Here was an AFA 80 LP logo, first release for the Land Speeder. That one sold for $40.41. Not a big surprise there, not a terrible number by any means. I thought that was a very good number for the LP logo Land Speeder. And the X-Wing also was an AFA 80. That one sold for $36.74. I thought that was a pretty good price there. And again, that was the early example from 1978. Here was the Chewbacca AFA 85. That one sold for $15.58. I thought for an AFA 85, that was a pretty fair deal. We've seen some that CIB/AFA, they had one of these that sold earlier this year, and it was not an AFA 85, but it was a very high grade example. But $15.58, I feel like for the grade of this one, it's just a very tough one to find. I feel like none graded higher, one of only 3 AFA 85 examples, and the very tough to find in this kind of grade just because of those blisters. But a very cool item, very unique item. It's not for everybody. Maybe that's part of it, because there were so many U.S. items that something like this, it's a very particular collector that would want this. But $15.58 was certainly below my expectations. Some proof cards that also sold. This was a 31-back A Chewbacca AFA 80 Plus that sold for $25.10, and we've seen some early ESB proof cards in similar grades sell on eBay from CIB. They were in this price point, that kind of $2,000 to $3,000 price point. So that's probably about right for that one. Here was an AFA 84, the Revenge of the Jedi proof card for Chewbacca. That number is actually a little higher than I was expecting at $1,450, given that was an AFA 80. And these Revenge of the Jedi proof cards, you know, I can't say that I've seen the Chewbacca recently. It's not something I've been looking for actively, but, you know, usually the first 12 heroes are a little bit more expensive. So I guess I shouldn't be too surprised at that $1,450 number. But, you know, AFA 80, I would think it would have come in closer to maybe somewhere between 1,000 and 1,200. But it is a first 12 character, so maybe that's in line. Here was another one that I thought was a great deal. This was a Chromalin uncut proof card, whatever you want to call it. I call it, you know, they say it's a proof card, but to me it feels more like a Chromalin. I don't know the difference other than that's, you know, obviously it's uncut. But it was a UKG 85, maybe because it was UKG that held it back a little bit, but $21.24 for that, I feel like, is a pretty good deal. That's a very unique item, pre-production, and very cool for Klaatu in the Skiff Guard outfit. Here was a 12-back AFA 60, but it had the white figure stand, and I had no idea where this one was going to end up, but usually when you have those white figure stands like that, they are very desirable. There's only a total of 3 of these on AFA's population report for all grades. And so that certainly played a factor, is that they are pretty rare for any character. So that one sold for $18.86. Another proof card. This was a Return of the Jedi proof card, AFA 85 plus for R2-D2 sensor scope. And as I alluded to in my preview video, is that this is more rare than Revenge of the Jedi proof cards. And admittedly, even for R2, it is going to be pretty expensive for the Revenge of the Jedi proof card. But this one ended up going for $39.93. I'm not surprised at all by that. You know, Return of the Jedi proof cards are very expensive, and that one was no exception, given that it was R2-D2. This was a big surprise to me on the upper end. This was the Imperial Shuttle, admittedly an AFA 85, but 9417. That's a big number. That is a big, big number for the Imperial Shuttle. 9,417 on that one. Huge number. And the Tatooine Skiff was an AFA 85, another really big number at 6432. Both of those numbers were well above my expectations, but huge numbers there. The die-cast TIE Bomber was a CAS 80 plus. That was a bargain. Somebody got an absolute bargain on this. I mean, we've seen plenty in my market updates where they've been ungraded, going for this price or well above that price. And this one was a CAS 80 plus for $847. I mean, it costs $150 to $200 just to put it in this really awesome case from CAS. And we've seen similar examples in similar condition, ungraded, go for well above $850. So that was a steal of a deal there. Great buy, whoever got that. Here was that Frankenstein Lily Letty hybrid, and I'm not surprised at all by this final sales price. So this has got a Lando Bespin head. I assume that's a Lando. It might be a General Lando. I don't know. No, because there's no General Lando Lily Letty. So it doesn't look like the Lily Letty Lando Bespin to me. His head doesn't, but I guess that's what it is. Obviously, it's got a Luke Jedi body. It's got 9 numb arms, and then it's got prune-faced legs. I assume that's prune-faced legs. All unpainted, and so these are very weird, kind of overstock parts that, you know, after the Lily Letty factory was going out of business. CAS 85 hybrid overstock, and it sold for $602, which is a massive number. That's a huge number. But wow, it's just such a cool item though. And you know, there's people out there that I remember when I was, like I said in my preview video, when I was selling mine, it was like a feeding frenzy. People were like just dying to get every one of them, and I didn't sell them for nearly this price. So this is just a massive number though for that overstock. It's just a very weird item. Some other non-Star Wars items that sold: an AFA 90 first release Snake Eyes from 1982 sold for $18,830. $18,000 for the first release Snake Eyes. That's a pretty iconic figure and character though, and an AFA 90, that's super rare. Unbelievable item there. The Castle Grayskull, we saw the last one that sold in, I guess, the summer premiere auction that went for like over $100,000. This one was an AFA 85, only one graded higher. This is one of 7 Castle Grayskulls, and this one sold for $31,126. So I would imagine that whoever consigned this one was probably a little disappointed just relative to the last one that sold, but it was probably, I'm assuming that the other one was a more unique one. But that really brings back some memories to see that again. So very cool, but well below what the last one sold for, which admittedly was probably a different version of the Castle Grayskull. Another iconic item is the pre-rub Optimus Prime from 1984, AFA 85. That sold for $40,364. One of only 3 AFA 85 examples, but that's an iconic item as well. I've still got mine. You can even see it in the right behind my head there, right near my nose, right there. That's the one that my grandfather gave me for Christmas when I was a kid. So I still got that. So that's really cool to see that one sell, but that's a huge number. And there were a number of Gentle Giant prototypes. There were some Power of the Force 2 12-inch, just the heads, the prototype heads. And, nothing crazy in terms of the final numbers there. For those heads, they were going for $200 to about $400, but there was a huge lot of these Gentle Giant first shot prototypes, and they all sold. And, on the low end, $193. The Jawa sold for $662. The first shot prototype Gentle Giant Blue Snaggletooth sold for $498. We've covered a number of those that have sold over the years on eBay, and they typically do sell for more than what these prices were. So, we've seen some, admittedly, a lot of those were unpainted prototypes from China, sellers in China that were, had connections to the factories that were actually manufacturing those. But a lot of those unpainted ones, like this Power Droid, for example, was a prototype CAS 50 Plus that sold for $547. I mean, we've seen some like Yoda and a few others that sold for huge numbers, over $1,000 for a few of them over the years. So just interesting to see those sell, but there were a number of those that were CAS graded that sold for at or below what some of them sold for on eBay. But anyway, I just wanted to kind of cover some of the recent sales. Another very well done auction by Dennis and his team over at LCG Auctions. There was just some incredible G.I. Joes that I would have loved to have had any of those in my collection. But I just wanted to kind of share some of the highlights from their auction. I'm sure they'll be doing another one next spring. And anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll be back soon.